Okay, for the last composition called 04 Logo Practice, we're going to do the same thing. I've already imported an Illustrator file that has all the elements saved to different layers. If I jump over to the completed example, you'll see I'm going to be using scale and position to animate the H, U, and B so it looks like they're flying by the camera. There are going to be two new concepts I want to show you first before we give this a try, and that is the concept of working backwards and motion blur. Let me first change the background color of my comp to white by using composition settings under the composition menu. There. A white background looks nicer for the example, don't you agree? So when I say work backwards, I'm talking about the order you create your keyframes. Since I'm animating my layers into this position, I'm going to create my final keyframes first. Move the timeline to where I want the H to land, then create the two keyframes for scale and position. This locks the H into the position and scale at that specific point in the timeline. Now all I have to do is move the time indicator earlier and start changing the values for position and scale. There we go. By creating my last keyframe first, I don't have to align these puzzle pieces in After Effects. That would be a pain. They're already lined up from the Illustrator file. Also, while I'm here, I'm going to click the little black sun switch that I mentioned in an earlier video, or actually it's called continuous rasterization, so that these layers, since I'm scaling them way up, they stay vector and don't look bad when scaled beyond 100%. The other feature I need to show you before moving on is motion blur. Motion blur is a great feature in After Effects. It really helps your motion look more natural. Each layer has a motion blur switch, and there's also a master motion blur switch at the top of the timeline. If I click the motion blur switch for the H layer and then turn on the master switch, After Effects will apply a blur based on the velocity of the layer. The speed and the direction of the layer will affect how much motion blur is applied. So motion blur is a topic you could spend a lot of time learning about. For now, just know that where the switches are and how to apply it to a moving layer. Remember, a layer has to be moving in order to see the effects of motion blur, and the layer has to be moving quickly. Slow layers won't be affected by motion blur. Oh, and one more thing that can be very helpful. If you need to have two keyframes with the same value, let's say you want a layer to move across the screen and then stop for a while, you'll need two keyframes of the exact same value. To do this, there's a diamond at the far left of the property, the position property. This diamond will create a keyframe based on the current value. So you can create one position keyframe, move the timeline a little bit, and then click that little diamond. These two keyframes will be exactly the same on that layer, so there won't be any movement. It's a little thing, but it's important to point that out. And also, while I'm here, these little arrows, they let you jump back and forth to the keyframes. That could be helpful as well. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm going to animate the hub logo. Just like in the last video, you can follow along, skip around, or just try it on your own. Go for it.